Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 23rd of April 2025. And we'll start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description, linked in the description to the video found below. Now, an uptick in a number of different categories here, some of them fairly significant, 1,210, creeping back up to the normal kind of loss stats for the personnel. Tanks, 8 tanks lost, almost a daily average, so that's significant, I think. 11 troop carrying AFVs, about half the daily average, so that's lower. 85 artillery systems is a huge number there. That's about almost 4 times the daily average. Just massive numbers of artillery pieces being lost. Of course, that's likely to include larger mortars as well. One multiple launch rocket system, one anti-aircraft warfare system, so that's good news there. We have 163 vehicles and fuel tanks being lost, so that's very significant in that category, and one piece of special equipment. So I imagine the Russians are attacking as per normal across the front lines. Lots of activity, somewhat been the sources that I usually rely on have been somewhat distracted by the peace talks today and what went on with the ammo depot that was blown up yesterday. So not seeing as many videos of frontline activity that we've seen over the last week. Really experienced an uptick of released video footage of late compared to where we were just a wee bit before that. In the absence of an Andrew Perpetual loss list, I'm going to give you the Oryx loss list. And although there's some different methodology going on, it gives you a kind of bit of a sense of what's happening. These usually, I think, are released every sort of 2 days. I think, let's have a look at what Jakub Janovsky has here. So we have a loss list for the 22nd there. And if we go back to previously, we have a 19th. So actually, it's a 3-day loss list. Okay, so the Russian equipment loss list of over 3 days for him is 98 in total. He won't be counting up things like cars, SUVs, motorcycles, all of that stuff. I don't think motorcycles are included here. No, so this is just heavier equipment, combat assets, if you like. We have 98 in total on the Russian list, and for the Ukrainian list we have 45. So 2 point something times the Russian losses and Ukrainian losses, including we've got 8, 10, 12 tanks for the Russians and 3 tanks for the Ukrainians, including a Leopard 2A4 destroyed, unfortunately. But there's a lot more tanks lost there. We've got quite a lot of AFVs and APCs, 14 MTLBs destroyed. Those are the tracked sort of APCs, 8 unknown AFVs. BMPs are plenty there. You got, oh my goodness. So in the BMP categories of all the different types, you've got 5, 9, 21, 25, 26, 27, 28 BMPs. It's just absolutely incredible. So a massive list of combat asset losses here for the Russians. Just seeing if there's anything really high value as far as air defense or similar. Borisoglepsk, one of those. That's a pretty costly bit of electronic warfare kit, I think, the Borisoglepsk. And then for the Ukrainians, we've got Strela destroyed. That's a short-range air defense system. But other than that, it's all pretty typical stuff. A couple of Bradleys destroyed on the list there. That's going to hurt. Okay, but the Ukrainians losing far fewer pieces of kit than the Russians. Now, the Kiev Independent reports that the Easter truce was used by the Russians to regroup in the Liman sector. That's just north of the Serebyansky forest, west of Crimea. Launched an offensive afterwards, according to the Ukrainian military. This so-called truce did more damage to us, Anastasia Blischik has said, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade. I think I would tend to agree. When the truce came, I was sort of surprised that the Ukrainians were so much up for it. I think there's a lot of PR going on there and a lot of communication to Trump and the American team that, hey, we're up for truces and we're serious about peace. But actually the truce in and of itself I think probably benefited the Russians more than the Ukrainians there. And that's the claim, at least from one source. It's been reported that Ukrainian Air Force's F-16s struck, and I reported on this, but just a bit more detail here, struck a drone base in Tetkino, Kursk region, so it's just over the border, destroying it and eliminating 20 drone operators. So there's the border there, and you can see Tetkino. In fact, this is the area, this is Kursk here, and this was where the Glushkovo, you've got the river coming along here. The same river then comes down there. The Ukrainians were attacking to Glushkovo. They wanted to control all of this area to the south of the river. They didn't succeed here. It's a bit of a disaster for them. Further to the east is where the main Kursk operation was, but they control, and I presume they still do, this area of land between the border and the river here, because it's a bit of a random place for the Russians to keep hold of, and so the Ukrainians have just pushed up to the river. But across the border here in Tetkino, across the river, they've had attacks into Tetkino variously. In fact, way back when the Russian volunteer unit, and the Free Legion of Russia unit, pro-Ukrainian troops, they actually were attacking into Tetkino way back. But anyway, that's where this drone operating headquarters or whatnot was hit. The Air Force has hit the site of launching Russian drones in Tetkino, Kursk region. The facility was used by the enemy to prepare, equip and launch reconnaissance, strike and FPV drones. As a result of the strike, up to 20 drone operators were eliminated. So that'd be a really high value strike there for the Ukrainians. Then we hear this is in the Daily Telegraph in the UK. The title of the article, Ukraine's Robot Army is a glimpse of future warfare. Developers say technology is not about replacing infantry, but integrating machines into military operations to gain the edge against Russia. So that's your tagline there, although Max24 reports that Ukraine plans to compensate for the shortage of soldiers in Ukraine by actively introducing combat robotic systems on the battlefield. Snake robot, controlled by operator from a bunker a few kilometers from the front line, moves to above the ground, neutralizing Russian mines in its path. So this kind of goes against what the tagline was, which we're not replacing infantry, but we're integrating them with infantry, whereas Max24 indicates that it is. My opinion has long been that the Ukrainians are using FPV drones as a proxy for humans. Like they would rather have 100 drones in the air than 100 infantrymen charging at the Russians or sitting in trenches defending. They'd rather do that defending with the FPV drones. So they are hitting Russian troops and material before it gets to the contact line, so that their troops don't have to fight, because their troops are so thin on the ground and they are so valuable to the Ukrainians. I would imagine there's some degree of replacing troops with UGVs as well, unmanned ground vehicles. That's what I would do. I would be like, right, we can't get hold of troops, but we can build stuff. And there's kind of a limitless amount of stuff we can build, but we don't have limitless humans, as long as we've got the money to build it. So the key is, can we secure financial support from allies? And then you look at the Danish model, where we can get investment from abroad into our own defense industry, that we can then export this stuff afterwards. Then actually, we can build the crap out of these drones and send these to the front line. So can we replace our humans? Probably not entirely, and you wouldn't want to, because humans can do things, certainly in the moment, that robotic UGVs and whatnot simply can't do. But there are elements of the work that humans do that robots can do, and that would save lives. So let's do that as much as possible. And I think that's what's happening. This Snake one is just one of the models that will be included in the arsenal of 15,000 robots, which, according to Kyiv, will be deployed to the front line this year. Wow. So I presume that's 15,000 UGVs deployed to the front line, and you could argue that each one of those UGVs does the job to some degree of a human being, whether it is clearing a mine, whether it is getting a stretcher to the front line, to the contact line, whether it is providing supplies in other ways, whether it is having a heavy machine gun. That is doing the job of another human, or possibly two humans, if you're talking about getting a stretcher there. So these, you have to control them with other humans, but those are not being put in the line of duty, if you like, in the line of fire. Sorry. I think you're going to see a massive proliferation of UGVs as well as UAVs, as well as aerial drones too, as we've been seeing. Now, there was this talk about the Saab being spotted in Lviv, or at least tracked on the radar. An AN-26 military support aircraft is flying in the sky over Ukraine performing a certain task. That's from Yuri Ignat, the former spokesperson for the Air Force. He still does a bit of, I don't know if it's formal spokesperson job for the Air Force. But anyway, on April 21st, people noticed an unknown aircraft with the call sign Welcome. It's flying over Ukraine, in particular in the Lviv and Vinnytsia regions. He's claiming it's an AN-26. Other people still thinking it's the Saab 340 AWACS plane. But just to let you know that the quasi-official line is that is an AN-26. Thank you very much, Ivan, for a cup of tea. Much needed as well. I don't think that's told us, they'll given us any greater clarity other than what the official line is. I think it probably still could be a Saab AWACS. Right, as well as that massive detonation or series of detonations and fires at the 51st GRAU, the ammo depot, there's also a fire in St. Petersburg yesterday. I don't know what caused it, what it was all about, but yes, it's apparently now being contained. Flammable materials in a warehouse caught fire. Hashtag Russia on fire. Okay, on to distant strikes, and it's been quite a night. It's been a pretty bad night for the Ukrainians. 134 drones sent, so that's a real uptick. We're starting to get back to previous levels of drones, where we had seen a couple of nights with 0 drones, and then down in the 20s, up as far as sort of 96 to 100 drones, and now last night up to 134. Interception rate wasn't great. 67 conventionally taken out, 47 hit by electronic warfare. That gives you 114. That's 20 drones out of 134 getting through. And those 20 drones, they have bigger payloads and can do quite some damage. And even the ones that aren't successful, that do get intercepted, they still come down and explode. So that's 134 exploding things around Ukraine. Where was hit badly? Well, Odessa particularly badly hit for the second night in a row. And here is some imagery that came out from there. In fact, that's a video I showed last night on the live stream with Greg. A cloud of nasty smoke drifts over the city of Odessa. The biggest fire seems to be coming from warehouses. A swarm attack again last night. This is where the drones gather over the Black Sea until there are enough of them, so they don't send them one by one, which is what they used to do. They actually gather them over the Black Sea, wait till you've got, 20, 25 drones, and then all 25 hit Odessa and they overwhelm air defenses and cause absolute havoc. Here we have more footage coming from Odessa. Civilian infrastructure is damaged. Multiple fires broke out in residential buildings and private businesses across the city. It's really awful in Odessa, I think, and has been for some time. Again, they kind of had a bit of a respite. I presume after they got some air defense equipment there into Odessa, but I think probably a twin pronged scenario of the Russians changing their tactics and probably attriting air defense as well has led to Odessa being really back on the menu in a really horrible way. Moving on from... actually, although this isn't from last night, this is the night before, it would have been the case last night. Pure Terrorism says, UA Voyager, Russia is attacking civilian areas using Shahids armed with cluster munitions. But your media won't show it because the world doesn't care, and that's just a fact, says UA Voyager. Odessa tonight. So someone's showing the shrapnel coming out from the cluster munitions of the Shahed payloads. Now, moving to Poltava. Poltava last night saw a massive explosion and a pretty horrible set of attacks. 3 people were wounded in Poltava in another attack here. Shahid drones hitting what looks like residential areas there. As often you see with these official photos, they will show you the residential areas, but no doubt there were other places hit all over Ukraine. Indeed, this is the explosion that was purportedly from Poltava. Massive explosion there. and then you can see that potentially that same explosion from a different angle in some further video footage coming out from Poltava. So massive explosion there. It looks like it's but I don't know, what was hit in Poltava. That looks like it's in the city itself. Really, really challenging night last night. Kiev, outskirts of Kiev particularly, air defense for stopping attacks, but of course what goes up must come down. So Brovary, which is often one of the outskirt places that gets hit quite a lot, but I think usually from falling debris. Also remember that the serious air defense systems are going to be on the outskirts of cities as well. Things like Patriots and Nazams, and they will be target number one for the Russians, as they throw their munitions into Ukraine. Then Kharkiv was hit again. 3 drones reportedly hit the same district. Big fires burning there last night. Really, really challenging. And then today, terrible strike in Marhanets. So Marhanets is just over the Zaporizhia reservoir, as was. I don't know how full of water it is now, probably not. More like a very large riverbed. Just across from Enerhodar, the Zaporizhian nuclear power plant, there are 2 places, Nikopol and Marhanets, and they often get hammered by the Russian artillery, but also by drones. And here, this morning, a bus was hit, a civilian bus full of people, hit in Marhanets. 9 people were killed, 30 injured. People were going to work. Russian strikes on Ukrainian civilians do not stop. Absolutely horrible. 7 women and 2 men were killed. And the number of wounded is 42. So a bus full of people hit by a drone. Drones that will know exactly what they're hitting. Moving target, that is a civilian moving target. Absolutely despicable from the Russians again. Yesterday, as well as last night, Kharkiv being hit. Yesterday, Kharkiv was hit in the daytime, so that was first significant difference. 7 people were injured. There were fires, but actually 12 explosions. I am amazed sometimes at how few people die from these attacks. Thankfully, obviously, but we had 12 or 13 drones were used in an attack on the city centre. In the end, 10 people needed treatment. Thankfully, no one died. And these, I think, coalesced and then did some dive bombing, these drones, and hit Kharkiv. But it seems, just, again, civilian areas. I'm not 100% sure, but, right in the centre of the city by the looks of it, or near enough. Then we have footage coming from Zaporizhia from yesterday. Ukraine hits military targets. Russia bombs civilians. Says Tim White here. 37 people were injured, 8 of them children. And I showed you, I think, this building yesterday, but just more pictures coming out of that. Just really horrific stuff coming out of all over Ukraine over the last 24 to 48 hours. The Russians have also destroyed one of the key enterprises of Kherson's region's energy infrastructure. So I think it's a big substation in the middle of Kherson was hit. Occupiers hit the facility that provides the city with electricity, and they hit it with artillery and drones. Attacks from drones continue to this day. And then what else? We go on to Ukrainian strikes. Now, I have no knowledge apart from this explosion in Rilsk, which is in the Kursk region, not too far from where we were just looking at Tetkino, just further north from there. The town in Kursk region was one of the first to be hit when foreign long-range missiles were given the go-ahead inside Russia last year. Rilsk hit, it seems, last night, but I don't know of any other damage or any other targets. I'm looking at whether Paul Sweeney has any firm data. No, just mainly on the 51st ammunition depot. Just going back a few days, it's April the 11th, a drone strike, and this is what happens often. This detail comes out of strikes that happened previously, so I don't have any information of strikes last night, but then in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be like, oh, April the 22nd to 23rd, this thing got blown up. And you're like, okay, so something did happen. So here on April the 11th, a drone strike targeted hangars housing an S-400 Triumph air defense system in Sorokino and Kursk region. So again, we saw last night in Kursk region, explosion in Rilsk, what was hit then. According to the usually well-informed channel Dozy Shpiona, the attack damaged an R149 AKSH-1 command vehicle and 96 L61 radar with shrapnel damage to its AESA, two 5P85S M201 launchers and 6 of 48 N6DM missiles. The complex was later evacuated for damage assessment. That is a really high value hit. Like, that is potentially tens and tens of millions of dollars worth of kit damaged or destroyed. And it's not always about the value of these things in monetary terms. It's about, yeah, okay, that might cost $50 million to replace, but can you build one now? And if you can't build it, then it could cost 1p or 1 million spondoolies, and it doesn't really matter because you can't make it. So it's about the ability for Russia to replace these high-value targets that are hit. But that's a really big set of equipment that has been taken out there, or damaged at least. Then, of course, you know, details of the ammo depot that was hit yesterday. Well, it wasn't hit, so I've included this in the strikes. There's no evidence it's a strike, and actually not many people are claiming it is, if anyone. The Russians straightaway said that this was an accidental detonation, unloading, and actually it could have been at the train station, or the train on the, unloading stuff from the train, where it could have happened. And that could explain a series of big explosions could be going along the train, but actually it definitely seems to be all over the depot itself as well, doesn't it? So we saw yesterday lots and lots of very impressive videos and images coming out from here. Russian Defense Ministry said it was a violation of safety requirements, and I think that's good for Ukraine. Like, what you'd want is this to be a mistake and not Ukraine hitting it. Now, it could have been sabotage on the train, it could have been sabotage at the site itself, slightly less likely. But if Russia are going to claim it was an accident, take that, because actually it means that Russia aren't going to give certainly any public retribution to the Ukrainians. Now, sometimes the Russians will say they would rather say it was a mistake, an accident themselves, rather than admit that the Ukrainians have done well. That's part of their PR game, so it could be that. But yeah, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, this happened as a result of the ignition due to a safety violation. Explosions hit the 51st GRAU in Vladimir region, destroying 100,000 tons of ammunition, some saying more. I mean, it carries up to 264,000 tons of ammunition, glide bombs, artillery shells, MLRS rockets, air defense, etc., etc. Who knows how much was actually destroyed? Here, no report says preliminary estimates suggest up to 80% of the stored munitions may have been destroyed, which would be well over 100,000 tons. Russia's 51st GRAU was still on fire through the night and into the morning. He says massive blow. Another point of view there, some really impressive footage, as I've said, of that place going bang. Now, Chris Owicki has a short thread saying the 51st GRAU near Arsenal near Moscow, which exploded spectacularly today, was a target of a massive theft in 2017, in which $7.9 million out of $16 million budget was stolen from a modernization program. And why this is important, because it might have affected how it blew up yesterday. These photos show the interior of the Arsenal in happier times. The drone footage above was filmed in 2017 during a press tour. The Russian authorities say that the explosion was due to safety violations and are setting up a commission to inquire about it. So there's your drone imagery of this whole facility, and each one of these might well have gone boom. And that could be what each of those massive explosions represented. In October 2017, the FSB opened a criminal investigation into Spetsmontaj LLC, a company which had been given 1.3 billion ruble contracts by the Russian MOD in 2013 to carry out construction and maintenance work at the arsenal. It was paid in advance. Always a dodgy thing to do, isn't it? However, the FSB was reported to have found as much as 646 million rubles, half of the entire budget, had been stolen by the company's management without the contracted work being done. The firm was subsequently liquidated by order of the Russian MOD. It's not clear whether or how the case was resolved. However, unless the stolen money was recovered, it's likely that the planned improvements were never delivered, which may have contributed to yesterday's explosions. I don't know, speculation, but worth knowing. Now, moving on from that, Ukraine, and it's interesting, Paul Sweeney has sent me some images, satellite images of the railway going right next to the, I wonder if I can copy that image address. Here we go. That's good that I can do that, actually. So with these images and this one as well, you can see that it might have been a bit of a mess next to the railway. So it would be relatively easy for this stuff, assuming that they are munitions of some variety or explosive to some degree. It would be relatively easy for this stuff. If the train was pulled up alongside and it blew up, this stuff is going to blow up as well. And that too, rather than these, one would presume, slightly more secure facilities here. But it looks like, to be fair, it all blew up because firm's data, or at least 5-6 of it, most of the facility seems to have given a heat signature on the firm's data. Moving on, Ukraine is still collecting intelligence to strike the Crimean bridge, according to Zelensky's Crimea envoy Denis Chitstikov. Resistance groups Atesh and Yellow Ribbon are gathering coordinates of air defences and other critical data. A new attempt might be in the works. Who knows? But it could also be a bit of psyops to get the Russians to move all their air defences to there. And actually, the Ukrainians never have an intention of attacking it. Now, moving on to other bits and pieces, India's Russian oil purchases are nearing a 2-year record. India's imports of Russian crude are likely to hit 2.15 million barrels a day in April, the highest volume since May 2023, according to Bloomberg, citing a couple of data. What do I think about this? It would be annoying if, well, this is the whole point of the oil price cap, is that you don't want to stop Russia selling oil because otherwise it starves the market and then drives up prices, and it's massively inflationary for everyone in the world. What you want is Russia to be selling that oil really damn cheaply so they're not making much money. And if India are going to be screwing the price down, as you would imagine they would, being a massive buyer, right? They are in a position of power where Russia is struggling to sell their oil, and India can command pretty much whatever price it wants to a certain degree. Then actually, this isn't too bad. So it's not too bad that Russia are moving that oil. The question is just at what price are they selling it? The value of this is generated by what India do to refine it. So they'll refine the crude oil, put extra value on it and use it themselves, or export that around the world. But the crude oil doesn't get as much, doesn't obtain as much value to the seller as the refined product, I think, especially when it's selling at sort of $50 a barrel or thereabouts, which is what we understand it to be selling at the moment. So I'm not too worried that India are buying as much of this as they can, as long as that price is low. Russia might be bracing for something big in Crimea, says Ukrainian Navy spokesperson Dmytro Platenchuk. Warships are dispersing near Novorossiysk, and air defense units are being relocated in occupied Crimea. So there's been a lot of talk, open source intelligence people, H.I. Sutton and people who keep an eye on naval stuff have been noticing that the Black Sea Fleet has been much more active out and about from Novorossiysk, where they've just been holed up there previously. So Russia is bracing for something big in Crimea is a claim here, possibly in anticipation of a threat from Ukraine in the Black Sea. I have no idea what they would be able to do. Here we have Russia is turning over 50,000 Ukrainian children into tools of war through camps, indoctrination and forced deportation, according to United 24. 50,000 Ukrainian minors, essentially from occupied regions, are being put through the ringer there, and might end up fighting for the LPR and DPR. That's a real shame for those in occupied regions. A federal judge has ordered Donald Trump's administration to rehire all of the Voice of America, Radio Free Asia and Middle East broadcasting networks. So Voice of America affects Ukraine to some degree. Staff for now, and said that all congressional funding must resume to the outlets which have been effectively shuttered by the administration. That's really good news, and I've been talking about how the US has just been giving up soft and hard power. In fact, they're effectively pulling out of Africa. They want nothing to do with Africa anymore. And even in Egypt, where they are contractually obliged to give assistance due to was it 1979, whenever it was, Israel-Egypt Accord, I don't know the exact details, but that's why the US provides a lot of assistance to Egypt. But even there, they're allowing China to basically muscle into Egypt and Russia too. So Russia and China are just lapping it up in Africa as the US pulls out, and quite incredible how much they're giving the keys of power away. With regard to Voice of America and Radio Free Asia and Middle East here, this is really good news that funding is back and that people will be back in their positions. What you do worry about is, well, if that's the case, then the Trump administration are likely to dictate a certain ideology that these guys are going to have to spout, right? So at the moment, they've been doing sort of pro-Western, pro-liberal democracy information spreading and reporting fairly on places like Ukraine, Voice of America. Now, I assume they won't be. So we loads of Voice of America vox pops, or like interviews of congressional lawmakers and also the president, when they were asking, as they walk down the corridors of the Senate or whatever, or of Congress, they Voice of America, I've reported so many times them asking really good questions, like, what are you doing about Ukraine, what are you doing here? The ideology might now be dictated in a very different way. Is that no, we don't care about Ukraine, you're going to concentrate on, I don't know, anti-woke campaigning and reporting from Eastern Europe or whatever. So funding's back, people are back, but what are they going to be told to report? That's key as far as I'm concerned. Now, I've already done a breaking news update, and I've just been contacted by Jonathan Fink, who wants to do a live to talk about this as well. But so I've already talked about this an awful lot. Just very quickly, the US has pulled out of peace negotiations in London in the top level sense. So no Marco Rubio, no Steve Witkoff, Keith Kellogg instead. And so foreign ministers from Europe are pulled out, and basically you got the Ukrainian delegation plus lower level people just going to be talking about, I don't know, price of fish or something. The US has offered an explicit proposal for the Russia-Ukraine peace deal, but will walk away if it's rejected, says JD Vance, the vice president. The US expects territorial concessions from both Ukraine and Russia. As I've explained, that's really only from Ukraine, because all of that territory is Ukrainian. He urged both sides to disarm, freeze the situation, and work towards better futures, and added that if the American peace proposal is not accepted, the US will withdraw from the negotiations. So they won't punish, as they said previously, well, if either side drags their feet, then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Now they've just capitulated. I've seen a meme, because the US has stepped back in terms of Chinese, the trade war with China, and the US has completely capitulated, and Trump has caved. And lots of people talking about that today. And there are these memes going around with Xi Jinping reading Donald Trump's not Art of the Deal, but Art of the Cave book, because the US appears to have caved. And here they're caving again. It's like, yeah, we're going to do this. If we're going to punish Russia with heavy sanctions and give Ukraine all the weapons they need if Russia don't come to the table and do X, Y, and Z. Well, Russia haven't come to the table, haven't done X, Y, and Z. And what are you doing? You're walking away. So you're not doing what you said you would do. It's just cave. If the US-led talks fail, says Marco Rubio, Ukraine could end up in a more awkward position in the future and receive harsher peace terms from Russia. In other words, Marco Rubio is advocating Ukraine take the first deal that comes along that Russia demand through the United States. So the United States are acting as a proxy for Russia, takes Russia's 5 to 9 points, depending on which article you read, and say, this is what you need to do, Ukraine. And Ukraine go, no, that's unconstitutional and it's clearly over our red lines. And then the US go, well, if you don't take this now, it could be worse for you. Russia will just make you do worse things. So we say you should take this deal right now. Just completely working on behalf of the Russians. Now for something completely different. I'm going to leave you with this. A 73-year-old man in Russia's Primorsky region has been trolling his neighbours. You can hear in the background some music. So in the background, you could hear some music there. So a 73-year-old man has been trolling his neighbours by blasting the Ukrainian anthem from a loudspeaker, then moving to a new village when things get heated. Locals say he's hit multiple towns, called people banderites, and keeps dodging complaints. Now he's in custody. Well, it was good while it lasted, and a good bit of public, not disobedience, but just, just quite like the fact that he's blasting out the Ukrainian national anthem till it annoys people. I'm not sure it's going to get people on side of the Ukrainians, but it does show that there is a bit of support for Ukraine from within Russia, even from like random 73-year-old men shouting. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I may well be doing a live later with Jonathan Fink. That's a lot of talking. But thanks so much for all your support. And please remember that we are doing the Car for Ukraine Easter Paisanki. And indeed, we have moved up into 6th place due to a very, very generous 2,300 euro donation. I think quite a few of the channels have received some big donations. I don't know if it's from the same person. Didn't leave their name, but it's amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please help us. I really wanted to get into sort of the top 5 above Rick the Ukrainian and the Shields. Then I'll be happy. Of course, I'm super happy that you guys have been wonderful in your support. So you can go to atpgeo.com/donate and it'll take you to this Car for Ukraine. Make sure you go onto the ATP Geopolitics part of this. So click on ATP Geopolitics and then do your donation through that one. And that will then be assigned to us. And you get yourself some pins, a patch, all these different things that you can get depending on how much you generously donate. But yeah, that'd be great if you can. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.